Here we go. Episode 7. Jason Moses O'Toole making a return. Back in the house. Not sure which kind of house we're talking about here, but some kind of a house. One with a podcast recording setup, I suppose, because that is what we did. We sat down, we talked about esports again, and this conversation was a lot of fun. We went over quite a few different topics, and I don't know, it's just so cool to have Jason on. I can already tell he's one of those guys I'm just going to be having on repeatedly on the podcast. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? He talks about CounterStrike for a living, and so he has a lot to say, and he has practice in getting it out there and articulating it. So a lot of fun indeed. We talk about the status quo. I suppose I was thinking about what a good title for this one would be, and I feel like that really sort of encapsulates the episode fairly well, because we do jump from various topics, but we talk about how it is to be talent and traveling around and trying to manage relationships. We talk about players and the current problems with practice and schedules and tournament formats. We talk about all sorts of jazz. It's a good one. So without further ado, Jason Moses O'Toole, ladies and gents. Okay, I'm recording now. Everything seems fine. So welcome to the podcast, Jason. We're back.
We're back again, so quick.
Yeah. So at this event, I'd intended to get a podcast with all kinds of people. Device. Supposed to do him today, but he didn't get back to me, unfortunately. I'm probably going to cut this out.
Such as a player.
Because I'm, throwing him under the bus there. But
you have thrown him under the bus. It's okay though.
Yeah, it's okay.
I gave 3 interviews this morning when I was over at the venue with people such as Unicorn, people such as Double Tap, and I have to say I did put the players on blast. No one specifically, but I did put the entirety of the professional playing scene. I threw my own bus at them, I guess you would say.
The Jason O'Toole bus.
I did throw a massive bus at them, and I feel a little bit bad about it.
Was it the struggle bus? Is that the bus you threw?
No, it was a painful, gigantic, it was like a twisted metal bus.
The monster
from
version.
The PlayStation game, yeah. So
nice.
That was brutal. Just generally, I've had it, so yeah.
What in particular was it about the sort of discussion about players? Can you elucidate?
So I was asked by the interviewer a question. Actually, I don't remember what I think it was something about. Actually, I don't know. Screw it. I forget the question. But I did say something. My answer to said question was something like, I see all these like tweets, and you have all these interviews with players, and they kind of are attacking Valve, and they feel like the game has stagnated, and that Valve needs to add something new. And I said, well, for me, and from I think I don't speak for guys like Yanko and Chad, but they are the analysts I spend most of my time with, obviously. I say from my perspective and from an analyst perspective, the game has stagnated more because it feels like there are teams out there who don't know how to practice well enough and who don't improve enough across event to event. There are teams out there that make mistakes over the course of multiple events over multiple months. And at some point, like, it's just kind of boring to watch teams making the same mistake and not improving. I don't think we've ever had a gap this big in the history, maybe since 2013 with NIP and the 87-0 run, where there's been such a profound and visible gap in ability of the number 1 team, which right now is Astralis, and the number 2 team, which is FaZe, who, fair play, they're playing with the stand-in, but Astralis just seems so far above the rest of the field at the moment. And to me, there's nothing that makes these players or this team any more or less special than any of the other teams in the field, except for the fact that they seem to be the first team that finally gets it in terms of practice and preparation, right? So it's mind-boggling to me that no team has been able to kind of catch up and be able to improve and be able to play, good Counter-Strike the way that they are at the moment.
Is that just down to like this? I mean, we talked about it on the first podcast we did, just the disorganization of the players from just a perspective of coming together and making their demands, because of course this seems to be the case that you're thinking, okay, well, what is stopping them from being able to do this? Well, the first thing you think of is the oversaturated schedule,
yeah.
And then you think about, okay, why are they traveling all this time? Surely that can't be comfortable. And then you start to think about it, okay, well, well, okay, well then they're getting, by doing more events, they get more exposure for the sponsors. Okay, this is probably a decision made by the team owners, so and the management.
Yeah,
so
I think this is why I think you're right, and this is why I feel a little bit bad about it. I don't really feel all that bad, but just a little bit bad is because
players do have the power though.
Yeah, but it is also because there is that kind of a crazy schedule where they don't always have the time to do that. But that's where like the efficiency has to come in, and that's where they do have to start skipping events if they're not performing the way they want to. And I guess on another level as well, I guess at a certain degree, if you're a player or if you're an org owner, the goal of being like a top 4 team, right, and making sure you get the invites to the event is like perfect because you're getting all the visibility, you're going to the events, you're having chances. But like, when is the goal to be the number 1 team in the world, right? When are you trying to make that leap? And if you don't take time and work at it, then it's never going to happen. And by the way, I mean, I know it's not entirely the player's fault. I mean, part of it is the tournament organizers having such a massive schedule and not really working together to create something, which don't necessarily expect TOs to do. Because I look at, I also look at myself, and I know there have been plenty of events where I haven't felt like my commentating has been at 100%. And I know there are events where, not just events, but just in general, where more can be done from a casting and an analyst perspective. But I know that's also not entirely my fault. I know part of it comes down to a tournament organizer wanting to create, the show and have the content that I want to create, or have the tools that I can use on the desk to be able to do something. So it's never just one thing. It's never just like, it's not just me who's kind of dropping the ball. And in some cases, it's also not just the players. It is kind of an entire CounterStrike community at this level that needs to collectively raise the bar. But yeah, the players got the biggest part of that bus.
It is it's an interesting one because as you say, like I like this image of the bus. I really feel like I just wish one day, maybe one day my show will get big enough. Someone have like fans making artwork for it, and then we can have the
here's what you have to do. Here's what you do. You just hire someone to do that for your show to begin with, and then you just retweet it, and you don't ever tell anyone that you hired them, and you're just like, look how popular my show is. People are making artwork for it. And then and then you've got started on the right track.
Okay, well maybe I'll leave a few episodes before I get on that.
Because now the idea's out there.
Yeah. But it's a funny one though, because I guess like when you get to that top 8 level of teams, you kind of do get the privilege. I think if you are the tier 2, then you don't really get the privilege to be like, well, actually, so Mr. Team Owner, we actually don't want to do every event. And they're like, well, you're bloody tier 2, aren't you? So
yeah,
you better get your ass to those events.
Even if you talk to like the tier 2 teams, like I just like the first thing that Energy said to me after like Starlighter, when I went up and I was like, hey, you guys were great this event, like nice job. And I forget which one of them said it, but there's a lot of logic in it, but it is just kind of funny to laugh at, where they just say, I just can't wait till we start getting invited to events, because no one wants to go through that grind of online seasons, of online qualifiers just to get to these events. It's difficult.
Yeah,
I think I'm a Pet put it out there that to qualify for ECS, because, and listen, they just qualified yesterday for the semifinals. I know after this event, it's not going to be criticism leveled at the team, but it is going to be just criticism in general, is that they get to the semifinals, but they only had to win 2 best of 1s to get there. And that's going to be a criticism. And I know I'm a Pet, he said, we had to play 17 games of a season and of essentially an online qualifier to get here. So, I mean, there's truth in that, and I guess that's the way you have to look at it when it is a tournament that is like the end of a season, the championship tournament of a season. But still, I don't know. I just think that invite level, once you get there, I think a lot of teams just feel that pressure kind of come off them because they are being invited to events. They don't have to work as hard anymore. They have more travel, and they have more opportunities to make that kind of a money.
It does kind of make me think of, the potential utopia that, it's just nice to fantasize about, this ideal situation when everyone's in a good spot, because you're saying, quite rightly so, that it's not just, the players that suffer, it's the talent as well, who do all the broadcasts, as well as, the production teams as well, who are also doing, as many events as they are. Everyone sort of suffers in a way that they, and not suffering from this sort of, you want to look at people and pity them. I don't mean that, but I mean that people suffer from a performance perspective, as you mentioned. Yeah. So, if you, it's always interesting to discuss the ideal sort of circumstances for the 100% performance. When it comes to
you lost your train of thought. You made your own joke and it wrecked you.
Oh god, what have I done? So either way, because for a commentator, when you're doing a big event, you're thinking, okay, I've got 1 best of 3, that's perfect. There's nothing in your brain that's limiting you. But if you have 2 best of 3s, I feel like even if you say to yourself, I'm going to go 100% to give like all of my energy and just really just make sure I have the best possible focus and performance here, there's a part of your brain that's still just holding on to some extra energy and holding on to the reserves. It's kind of like running in that way. Like if you go running, it starts to get very uncomfortable, but your brain still allows, even when you feel like you can't run anymore, there's still like a lot of extra gas in the tank. Like when you hit empty, there's still that 25 miles you've got left out of the tank, and I feel like that's how it is for commentators.
Don't know what kind of runs you're going on, you psychopath. But yeah, I think more so. It's not so much. I think the drop-off comes... Well, I think most of it is the mental strain, obviously, especially with some of the circuits, some of the stretches that we've done this year where, we're in Australia, right? Or we're doing the online season, and then we go to Dreamhack Marseille, come back, do one more week of the online season, and then we fly out to Australia. We do IEM Sydney, and then, we had like a week off, fair play there, but then you go to Dallas, and then, 4 days off, and then we're in Ukraine. And all of these events, maybe outside of 1 to 2 teams, have the same exact teams there and the same exact squads. And you have all these squads that are all these teams that are in this limbo period where they're trying to improve, or they're kind of not at their peak. And because of that, they don't have well-established map pools. So you're watching the same teams play the same map, essentially 6 weeks in a row with, one week off in there. And I think that's kind of the lethargic nature that I think we deal with on a mental thing, is like, how are we going to get excited to cast these matches when we just saw this played a week ago, when we just saw it played, even before that, maybe 3 weeks before that, and then 1 week before that, we saw it online. And, where's the kind of excitement? And I think from I know from my perspective, and I'm sure there's some analysts and some other casters who share this, although I haven't quite, necessarily sought them out or would want to name them. I think most of my issues with it is from the preparation point of view. People always say, like, how do you prep for a tournament? And, you always see, like, I know Red Eye tweets out like his kind of prep for his Dota events that he does and everything like that. And the answer is I don't. Just because, one, we are at so many events, and most of the knowledge that we have is just in there from seeing it from a week ago. But also, there's no real way to prep for an event anymore because there's just not enough time. Like, if I want days off, it is I've been on the road. I've been home less than a month since January. So when I get my days at home, I am not doing CounterStrike. I am not prepping. And even if I'm traveling...
You monster, I can't believe it.
I know.
You traitor.
But even if you're doing an event one weekend back to a 3 days of online league and then to an event that weekend, you have maybe 1 day off to do prep. And once again, it's like, well, I have to send in 5 invoices and do laundry. And it's like, I'm not going to think about CounterStrike on that day either. So it's this really weird thing where... And yeah, you can say, like, take an event off. You can say the same thing that we say to the players to say it to us. I think it's a little bit of a different scenario for us in a certain degree. But also, I mean, it's just, even if I wanted to prep, even if I had the 3 days, I remember I used to do this for the majors where I'd say, I'm going to prep so hard for this major. I'm going to come in with like a whole packet prepared of all the stats that I want. And then you actually get down and you sit down to the task and you're like, even if you have the number of teams of the major, if you kind of estimate the 8 teams you think are going to make it to the playoffs, that's 8 teams that you have to research 7 different maps. And even if you eliminate, 1 or 2 maps, they have permabans. You go down, let's just say 5 maps per team. That's so many maps. And if you want to watch demos and review, you can't just watch one demo of a map that they played, 20 times in the past week. You have to watch a couple to notice the tendencies and to have any kind of meaningful thing. And all of a sudden, for one team to study 5 maps to watch 10 demos, where are you going to find that time? Where's that going to happen? And it just, there's not a whole lot I think that there is out there to prep for outside of the basic stuff. And even if you do, if you get to a desk segment, where are the tools to show that, like what do you actually have on a desk? You have your memory. I think one of the greatest crimes that we have in Counter-Strike at the moment is the way that, our production, our broadcast just abandoned the analysts on the desk. And I'm saying this as someone who's a caster now who spent 2 years in the desk. And part of the reason why I am a caster now is because of the frustrations of being on the desk. Yeah, I got out when I could. But I mean, just like, think of it this way, like, we had the first weatherman segment that we had was Yanko at Dreamhack Malmo, right? Now, what a lot of people don't know, that was very early on when he transitioned from being an observer to being an analyst, and then thank God he did that. Yanko was great. But part of the reason why they gave him the weatherman segment was because at the time his English wasn't as strong, right? So they wanted to give him some Counter-Strike to kind of base his, have like a knowledge so he could, easily navigate, and he knew exactly what he was going to say, and he could kind of pre-plan it because he'd have a round selected out, right? Give him some extra help on kind of, performing in front of the camera in his second language. And he knocked it out of the park, but you can count on two, maybe even one hand the amount of times that we've had working telestrators and a working weatherman segment since then in 2 years. I've had, I know E-League did it with a tablet. I know some of the other DreamHack Masters events did it. Outside of that, where's...
Do you think it's just this case that a lot of these a lot of people who are in charge of creating this show and budgets and various things like that, they're just looking at these segments and like, well, there just doesn't seem to be a point. Do you think that's the problem? It's actually a signifier of a greater issue in the way that we run analyst segments or the formats that we have at tournaments that don't properly allow it. Like, for example, we don't have a match of the day, really, for example. Like, after a bunch of games, we don't have this hour and a half slog of analysis with tools and replays and so on.
I guess that's not necessarily a question for me. I think it would have to be budgetary in terms of, I know there was a great thread on Twitter when Yanko brought up some of the issues he had, I forget after what event, where Adam Apicella from MLG responded and was like, all of a sudden, if you want to run a segment like that, you have to obviously pay for the telestrator, you have to have it there, you have to have a separate TV for it, you have to have all these cables running in, you have to have a separate, I don't know all the production equipment that you need. So there's obviously monetary investment there. He mentioned you'd need a separate producer. Again, I don't know if you could be able to run that with just the same producer that does the main show. But he kind of listed off all these, obstacles that he just thought of off the top of his head without knowing the detailed situation. And yeah, there's probably some obstacles there, but I mean, still, there needs to be something, right? Like they need to have something. You put them on the desk, and here's the analyst is the most unfortunate creature in CounterStrike broadcast. Maybe even more so than a host in a certain way, because the host gets fucked on scheduling, right? The host has to do everything, every single segment, which is also a crime. But the analyst is expected to be knowledgeable at the game. He's expected to demonstrate that knowledge with like a wow moment every single segment. He's expected to be funny, to be able to entertain the audience tuning in. He's expected to fill time when called upon. At any random moment, he might need to fill for an extra 15 to 20 minutes, and depending on, the organizers, like the Eastern Europe guys like Starladder, like Epicenter, usually you can get up to, I think they filled for 2 hours at an Epicenter last year. And they're also expected to be able to make their point quickly and succinctly if they need to all of a sudden, throw to get the game started or whatever it might be. They're expected to do all of these things, and they have no tools to do it. They're just a talking head that just sits there, and they're not given anything to work with. And I know, like, imagine being a commentator and not having the kill feed. That's like what the analysts have to work with. Or imagine being, a teacher without a whiteboard or a blackboard, or whatever it might be. Imagine being a cab driver without a rear view mirror. Just one like essential piece of your job that you use to be efficient at it is just never there. And it's insane the amount of pressure that's put on them by community as well. Because I know one of my big frustrations was towards the later stages of my analysts of being on the desk, and was kind of like, Moses doesn't actually like demonstrate any kind of in-game knowledge, and like that's fair play. You can always disagree with me, but it's because you give up at a certain point. And when you're on the desk, you're expected to be this knowledgeable creature, and there's so much emphasis on being knowledgeable and having in-game knowledge, and you need a personality that knows the game at the professional level. And the people who can provide that the easiest, who have all the tools, are the commentators. And you look at our commentator trios at the time, and it was you and James, it was Anders and Semler, and it was Matt and Henry. And I mean, this isn't like a slight against any of you guys, but there's no like color commentator and you and James, or there is, but there's no professional Counter-Strike experience there. Same with Anders and Semler. Henry was a professional source player, and that's not a knock. I think he does a phenomenal job, but it's a different type of analysis that you do when you're casting. But if you look at that, it's minimal amount of analysis provided by the majority of the show, and everyone wants to knock on the analysts for not being able to demonstrate when they have nothing. You have to call from memory around and replay it in your head and be able to translate that to the viewers while the camera is just you. It's not even game footage. So all of a sudden, how are you expected to make some kind of a complex point?
That's one of the worst things, that we don't have any visual assists. That because if you want to ask someone to create a point that is succinct and that is absolutely like the highest value quality or asset as to or skill set, if you are an analyst on the desk, be succinct, find a quick way to make a point, but then most of that is trying to actually describe as though you're like, George R.R. Martin or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, remember back to round 7 in that first half. It was 45 minutes ago.
The sun was setting.
I forget the player at the time, but it was so-and-so was coming back into the ball, and it's
light was hitting the.
And that was always the thing that pissed me off the most is like, why is there just such like, why do I have to be funny, knowledgeable, and succinct when, I have, 3 minutes in a desk segment, and I also have another guy that I'm working with who needs to have his time to say something, to have his opinion. And then the casters get an hour to go through the game, and you got one duo talking about what Sunday roast is your guys' big thing, and cheeseburgers, and then you got the other one making gay jokes.
Let's just we can put that's actually the funny thing, right? I was about to say you can put James in the corner by himself, and then Matt needs a corner by himself.
Yeah.
And Henry's his own thing.
And then Anders is losing his mind. He's talking about simulations. And I'm out here on the desk, and I'm just like, please, I just want something. Just put CounterStrike footage on the screen.
Can't wait to see like the documentary that is like the slow decline of Anders or something, which is just like the broadcast year by year, just looking at the transformation. Yeah, the signs were always there.
Yeah, they were all there. We should have seen it. Well... Yeah, no, but that was always my frustration on the desk. And I know the other one is obviously the schedule, which is kind of lessened. I think the organizers have started hiring extra analysts for every event, so they get a better rotation. Back when 2016 and even most of 2017, the majority of it was you were kind of like the host. You were doing every single segment. So being an analyst was just torture. Getting to watch casters go out and enjoy the city and have dinner and go out for drinks and stuff, and hour 15 you're sitting there like, fuck my life. But that's all in the past. I've gotten over it. I held no grudges. I have joined the dark side now. I am one of you.
There you go. But I mean, that's the thing though. It's like I always feel like we never did enough to try to facilitate change. I don't know if you agree with that, but I feel like a collective effort was not necessarily made in the ways that it could have been to help to really appeal and to create some kind of resolution to at least alleviate some.
Are you talking about the caster versus analyst thing?
Yeah, I think so, because
go on.
Because in part, sometimes it was looked at in this way, that you have the analysts versus the casters. Like there's like
there was that
hidden
small
animosity there, because it was no one's fault really, as far as the people in the green room. In this instance, but I feel like collectively it's in everyone's interest to create a better working environment for everyone. I mean, it just helps the broadcast, helps everyone. So
yeah, it's just always difficult when you get into those, because it's still there to a degree. I know I catch that flack from analysts now that I'm a commentator, how quickly they forget that I was that I was an analyst at one point.
You must be the worst, because you're a turncoat now.
Yeah, so. I know. I'm the traitor. But I mean, it's one of those weird things where it's always going to be difficult when you have to ask one group to give up like a massive amount of their luxury, right, for the other one. And I agree with you. I think that there should be more to kind of, help the analysts. And I remember when I had these arguments as an analyst with the casters, or not arguments, but discussions with them, they were just like, why am I the one giving something up? And because I remember when the split first happened was right after Cluj, because remember Cluj was one of the last events where that major, we had the casters on the desk with us, and everyone would be doing both roles. People would cast and be on the desk, and everyone was going back and forth. And I think it was just Richard and Duncan that were only two staples on the desk. And after that, when the duos kind of got set up, it was we're not going to be on the desk anymore, and we're only casting with each other as well. So once you started in 2016, all of a sudden things got much more defined, and the analysts never kind of have that same power as the commentators do. But yeah, there needs to be more done. I think the scheduling portion has kind of worked itself out. I think most events now, the tough part is when you go to an event, even like Epicenter, I think is the one where like, the smaller, not like tier 2 events, but like, I guess the tier 2 organizers, if you can put it that way without being too insulting, like ESL and Faceit and, E-League and Refresh and Blast would probably be up there in like the tier 1 organizers. And when you get down there, Star Ladder's probably up there as well. They still kind of operate on that mindset. We only need 2 analysts for a whole event. But the scheduling has mostly been figured out. Now it's the tools. Now it's like, what can we give them to actually do their job? And it comes. I don't know how you feel with this, because I think right now what the big thing is, it comes down to like a philosophy of what you want the desk to be. If you want it to fill time and be entertaining, then you don't need those tools, and you need to hire the right personalities to do that. And if you want it to be an actual analysis desk, if that's what you're looking for, to be able to break down and preview the upcoming game, then you need to give them the tools to work with. And it doesn't necessarily matter which philosophy you fall under, because I think there's going to be people with different philosophies, and there will always be different events. I know ECS, for instance, takes a much more casual approach to their desk, especially during the online season, than like ESL, who obviously wants to like focus theirs more after like a Sky Sports. But like you need to give the tools to whichever philosophy you're subscribing to, you know? And I don't know if you like the desk to be more analytical, or if you like them to be more fun and casual, but you know, you need to pick one at some point, right?
Yeah, I think what that really speaks to is the fact that you do need every part of that within a show. You need the entertainment value, you need the comic relief, you need the personality, but you do also need to pay respect to the integrity of the sport and the competition, as well, with you know, really good analysis for the people who are really passionate about the teams and the players that they are fans of. So I think we just have this general problem where there's like too many games. The way I actually don't know what the solution is, because I mean, it's really difficult. I mean, in the perfect world, in a sense, maybe you do have like a match of the day type situation where you have a 2-hour slot where the analysts take all the matches of the last, you know, days, a couple days or whatever, and they just go through them, the highlight moments, the important narratives and storylines, and you make a show out of that, and you know, you throw some entertainment in there. Or you have to somehow squidge it into the event, which is already tightly packed, and then they can't really do analysis, but they can kind of do entertainment well. And I do think the desks in CounterStrike are really good from an entertainment perspective. Unfortunately, I know that a lot of the analysts have generally been outspoken as well, and saying that, yeah, well, you know, we're doing a good job, but this is actually when people turn off the stream. So, and that's not always true. Of course, it's a bit of a grim outlook, but I do think that's people do find, like, we have all the talent, like, that can do all of the things. It's just the arrangement.
This is where you start tying into like mental fatigue, though, because the first thing that happens when you're overworked and overstressed, whether it's a commentator, whether it's an analyst, whether you're just creating content for a show or for a broadcast, whether it's live or recorded, is the fun stuff is the first thing that goes, right? You don't want to do the skits. You don't like have that creativity. You're not thinking about something in between, like, oh, you know, I have this funny joke that, you know, I have about so-and-so or this team or this player, or I have this little skit we can do. Those are the first things that get tossed out. So you can't have as much fun. Like, when was the last time we saw someone smashing a baguette against the table? Not that that was like some kind of like example of high tier comedy, but you know, it's something, you know? So yeah, it is. I think our broadcast team, whether, you know, between me, you, James, Anders, Matt, Henry, Alex, Yanko, Chad, like, we have all the ability to have those fun segments, right? We have all the knowledge, and we can be those fun personalities and creative personalities. Again, it comes down to, I know some producers don't want that as part of their show. Some producers want their show to be more serious than others. Some shows and producers are willing to be more open about it. But I mean, the more thing is, when you talk about the amount of games, is just like, where's the time? Like, if we wanted to create like a 5 to 10 minute segment, like pre-show of us playing a game of some sort, you set up kind of a skit that you have some kind of a prop on the desk where, I don't know, something silly, but like, where do you find that time in the broadcast between all these games? You just have to churn them out. I know, like, for instance, like, I know I told ESL, because their online seasons are quite a slog. We did like 6 games a day last season. I know you guys do more with both the regions, but it is just kind of, it is, you know, at times during the season, you're really battling through insanity of those stretches. Those online seasons are a grind for us. And I know when I talked to ESL after the season, I was just like, why don't you guys, like, you can make this so much easier. Instead of doing like 6 games a day, take the best of 2 there is of that day. And, you know, say, you know, you have, if we just use the North American scene, say you have like Complexity versus Ghost, you've got like NRG versus Luminosity, and then you've got like Cloud9 Liquid. You pick Cloud9 Liquid, and you make that the game of the day. And what we do is you do a 4-hour show about that matchup specifically, and the other games get broadcast on a different stream or whoever. You open up the GoTV IP, and obviously this comes into the broadcasting rights, but we can avoid that kind of a conversation. But all of a sudden you can actually build a 4-hour show around this, where you give the analysts an hour and a half to actually dive into the map of what's actually going to happen, actually able to do their job, give them like the ability to research and plan segments around it. And then that's just the broadcast for the day.
Yeah, I like
it's just the 4-hour one instead of 6 hours where you just do bullshit about six different games. And I think that would be so much more intriguing. That's the crazy thing. Like when you watch traditional sports, they obviously don't have to do like 6 basketball games or 6, soccer games in a row.
Can you imagine?
That'd be mental. But what they do is they build, 4 or 5 hours worth of content around that one game or around the day's game. And we're not doing that in esports at the moment. And it's difficult too, just by the nature of the map vetoes. Like I know this was one idea I had with Refresh when they consulted with us. I know Chad and I went into a meeting. Anders was obvious there as well before their first event, like months before it. And they were like, what could help you guys do your job better? And I just straight up said, listen, you have 2 days of games and you know exactly who's playing because it's round robin. You know they all have to play each other, right? Do the veto 2 weeks in advance. Just do the veto ahead of time. Let the analysts have the maps. Let them actually be able to research it. At some point we can get to the point where we're building content around that map specifically for that matchup, and you don't have to put it on the broadcast. You can throw it on YouTube, throw it on Twitter. We can make shows leading up to an event for a week, and that's like in the future once you start building the broadcast. But if you have the maps ahead of time, which unfortunately is impossible when you do a major or when you do an IEM stop, then you actually, that problem that I have when I'm trying to research 8 teams for 5 maps each, you can throw it out the window. I know exactly what maps to look at. I know exactly what matchup to look at, so all of a sudden when you have that prior knowledge, you open up the door, and that's one of the luxuries that we don't have in CounterStrike by nature of the map veto system that makes things difficult.
Yeah. I remember in the very early seasons with Face It, me and James pushed massively for the idea of just being like, guys, just imagine if we know the maps for every single game before the season starts of the entire season. And we actually did that for a couple seasons at least. Teams
don't like it though, do they?
That's the problem. Yeah, teams don't like it. And it's really funny because we had some really humorous situations. Like we had Train that had just come in at this point. So this is a long time ago. This is 2015, right?
That's way longer.
And
it's a hot minute.
And it's so funny because I just remember this distinctly. NIP, they just really didn't care about the veto, it seems, and they just picked Train every single time. I mean, obviously because in their history with the map and in previous iterations of the game, they're very good at it. But that wasn't the case. They were kind of awful at it back then. It's like one of the worst maps in their pool, but they just picked it every single time. It's really amusing. But yes, it does seem like we haven't really, no one's really been brave enough to try to challenge the status quo. And one of the interesting issues I see with what you proposed, although I do really like the idea of having that highlight matchup, which you really dig deep into. One of the issues there is that there's a lot of fans out there that do just want to see frags, so they just want to see maps playing out. Now, it's really up to tournament organizers, broadcasters to dictate how the sport is watched, and it's a great way to stand out from other people as well. So I'm surprised that no one has really tested the waters there, because there's always going to be pros and cons. The fact is that what we have now has a lot of cons. It has loads of cons right now, as we've just been discussing. The thing
Focus on all the negatives.
it's just the status quo, and it's always been like that, and so no one's ever really questioned it. And that happens with so many things. There's so many instances where even with for example players, we see this when players get picked up from different teams and so on. It's just the status quo. They know people, they have name value, but that name value may not correlate whatsoever into the server. Not throwing anyone's names in there, but we all know, so we can all bring up some names like that. So, and that happens within all industries. So someone has to take the first step eventually, because we've got to try these other formats, surely.
Yeah, no, you always have to we have to be trying something new, because obviously what's happening now, I guess, just isn't working. I guess I don't know. Like it's we still hear all these conversations about tournament organizers struggling to make money, and it's just like, well, if you're not making money and you're doing the same thing for 5 years in a row now, like isn't that the definition of insanity?
Well, that's the weird thing, isn't it? Because how are you typically going to make the money? Well, the most obvious answer is always numbers. And so if you can get more eyeballs onto your product, you can sell more because of sponsorship deals and marketing affiliation, all that kind of stuff, right? That's the very basics of how the economy works with it all. And so I think that's been like one of these inherent issues, is that everyone's kind of sort of investing in esports, and just Fortnite's amazing because we're getting way more people that are going to be sort of literate in FPS now, or pseudo FPS, it's kind of third person, but same thing.
Joysticks and mobile phones and all that.
Yeah, and so we're bringing more and more numbers. Then we've got all the Overwatch people. Like esports is becoming this sort of term that's actually no longer really a meme or a joke, and is kind of what is used to define our industry, which is great. And we're getting to the point where we do have numbers, but it's just this fluctuation is difficult to monetize.
I think part of it is, mostly what hasn't caught up is our sales department's ability to sell on these numbers. And I think that's the big thing. That's one thing I noticed with a lot of organizers, is that when you talk to the bigger brands that have the cash to spend, that I think that's where there's a lot of ground to gain still, is being able to actually market the product properly. I know E-League did a very good job, but their salespeople come from traditional sports, where they already have pre-existing relationships with brands like Arby's, Snickers, was it Domino's? I think it was.
Yeah,
these other like ESL, ECS, they don't have that kind of relationship with those kind of big brands out there. So that's not a knock on them, but I think eventually that's going to catch up. I think also we need real numbers. We need you need to be putting out the honest numbers. And that's not a shot at anyone. It's just I think there's a lot of ways that the outside world coming into esports won't know exactly where the pitfalls are, where the landmines are. And I think there's a lot of people, and this is always the conversation. We see plenty of people on Twitter talking about it. Like, this is where the esports consultants come in. And I think companies have to be very wary about that. I was always interested. There was like a point of pride in my career where I got super pissed off. I got super triggered.
Yeah.
And it did privately. I wasn't like on Twitter, like, going crazy. When all the NBA teams in the States started backing up, was it the Sacramento Kings or something is behind NRG, and the Rockets were coming in, and there were all these squads that were kind of backing all the owners. And I remember when NRG picked up a CounterStrike team, and I was sitting there and I was like, why the fuck did no one consult me on who's putting together this lineup? Because the first lineup that NRG brought together was just it was terrible. It was atrocious. And I was like, how did I not get taught? How did no one say let's grab an expert of the North American Counter-Strike scene, and we'll talk to. I guess maybe they don't think I'm an expert. Maybe I'm just opening myself to get wrecked here. Obviously,
this guy has no in-game knowledge. What does he know?
Let's get that. Let's get out of the way. We've all wrecked me. It's all funny. We all laughed. But how no one even said a word. What is it? Not even like a message on Twitter to be like, hey, this is the team we're looking at picking up. What do you think? And that's because there's, I've actually talked to some people about that, and asked that very question once I got done being pissed off, and I was very reasonable about it. And I was just like, so how does that all work? And they were like, yeah, there's about 5 steps of people that we talk to before we even kind of know you exist when you're coming from the NBA world. And I mean, that's fair enough as it is, but it is just so very interesting. I'm like, where? Who are these Counter-Strike people? Who are these experts of Counter-Strike?
It's like some evil faction, like the Sith.
Is there
or
a Skype group somewhere that I should be involved in? Because these are the guys that are making more money than I am as well. They're making more money than being not knowing what they're talking about.
Yeah,
it's
that's
great.
crazy.
Yeah.
How does that? It's just.
So I'm just like, well, let's lessen that. Let's remove 4 or 5 layers there.
Maybe we need to infiltrate. We need to become the esports consultants, Jason.
It is funny. I've actually, obviously wanting to do more consulting things just because the money's phenomenal, and it's an easy way to do some work without having to travel across the world to do work, right? And I know it's a tough world. A lot of your time is occupied by having to have discussions with the people with money and convincing them to part with that money to you. You really have to be having some wild conversations, and it's like talking to sponsors over and over. It's like selling yourself as a product, which we're obviously used to doing to a certain degree, but within the Counter-Strike realm. And then all of a sudden you're talking to multimillionaires, and it's like, why should I be giving you $200,000? Why should I be paying you $5,000 a day to consult for my company? And those probably aren't the easiest conversations to have either.
I feel like as well, coming from the Counter-Strike world, talking to those people in big industry, we kind of have that effect of the kid who's been poor all his life, has no entitlement. It's like, why should I get that $200,000? That's a good question. I don't deserve that.
I'm glad you asked that, sir. No, I mean, it's weird. I can't have those conversations very well. I probably could eventually. But I remember when we were at Oakland last year, that's the guy who owns the stadium is the one behind Team Liquid. and I was talking to some of the Team Liquid guys. I was in their booth, like having a hot dog or something, or eating some of the food over there. And the guy walks in, and I get introduced by one of the Liquid guys who knows me, and he's like, "This is so and so. He's one of the owners of this booth, of the arena. He's like one of the co-owners of what is it, the Warriors, I think it is, or something like that." And then just as like a throwaway comment, he's like, "Oh yeah, and he's also the guy who co-founded like Nerf guns." And I was like, "What?"
Whoa.
I was like, "That was my childhood. I have so many Nerf guns back home. It's unreal." And that was the one that like floored me. It wasn't the basketball. It wasn't the all the other. It wasn't owning the arena. It was the Nerf guns, because that was like my childhood. And all of a sudden, it was like,
that's big, man.
It wasn't like chills. Wasn't like get nervous, but it was just like, holy shit, like this guy's fucking loaded.
Nerf, that's just
Nerf was Nerf was great, man.
When you create a product where people like forget what the actual thing is called, but they just call it by your brand name.
Yeah,
that's when you've won.
You've won the game.
You've won the
absolutely
game.
won the game. Well, the best part is what Nerf was actually created by like a NASA astronaut or something.
Oh,
like
cool.
just in as like his part time.
Yeah,
but obviously doesn't have like the business expertise. So it's this guy who like did the legwork.
That's always the issue, like having, and you brought this up earlier, just having people that know business and know sales is really difficult, because there's a lot of people, because I think it, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that will always overestimate their ability, but I feel like, especially in the business world, you come across that a lot, where people really overestimate their abilities, and if you yourself are ignorant, there's just no way for you to know.
Well, I think it's funny. There's this trend, and it's been lessening, I guess, over the past few years. But there was for a time, and there still is to a certain degree, this thing where it's like, oh, this guy's been so dedicated to esports for like a decade. Give him the job. It's he deserves it. He's put so much work in, and it's like, fuck that. Like, I want someone who's going to come in and get results. Like, we don't need more people who grew up in esports. I think people I came from an age of esports where if you were involved in esports, you had failed at something else in your life. You had really failed at something else in your life. If you were in esports by like, late 20s, early 30s, you had failed. And I mean, fair play. The reason I even got back into esports, because I was out of it for like 4 or 5 years, was because I failed. I did not do college well.
We're fist bumping right now because so, same for me.
I came back, and it was not like I guess it was sort of a desperation, where it was like, okay, hopefully CounterStrike blows up, after I'd watched I'd been watching LCS, their commentators and everything, and I got fortunate and lucky in that regard. But I don't want those people anymore. And I'm one of the people who benefits from that. I'm one of the people who, like, if we were handing out esports jobs based off of tenure and who's been in the longest and who sacrificed the most, I'd probably be up there, I like to think, with some of the things that I've had in my past with esports. But bring in the college graduate out of Harvard who's a sales guy and doesn't know esports. We'll teach him esports. Just sell.
Yeah. No, actually, this is funny. I mean, I know a lot of people that have. I'm surprised to learn oftentimes, because I'm just used to being surrounded by all the esports people who are from esports. But I've come across at this point quite a few people that have come from the business world or come from the broadcasting world, and then learned esports after the fact. And they're some of the best people that I know in esports.
Well, think about Turner as well. When we were there, none of them knew anything about video games or CounterStrike, and they all love that shit now. Like, the cameramen all know how the game is played. Like, they're all, mostly because they just want to go home, so they're just trying to learn how it's played so that they can see like what time they're going to get out. The director, like what's his name, Daly, had like blogged like 100 hours of CounterStrike against just bots. He just wanted to play the game, so he learned it. And those guys came from television broadcasting, and they'd worked on soap operas, they'd worked on game shows, they'd worked on whatever, and they just learned the game. So it's not hard to teach esports to someone who wants to learn it. And I think that's the big thing is we now have this industry where it's exciting enough to attract people. So let's bring them in, and we can teach them the rest. They just need to be bringing that business knowledge and then kind of what we lack.
Yeah. We lack many things, Jason.
We do lack many things.
We lack many things.
Yes, mental capacity being one of them.
That so there was this Joe Rogan podcast not so long ago about the sleep scientist on.
Don't get me started on this one. I had to turn it off. It was scaring me.
Oh yeah, it's scary, isn't it? There's so many points that I absorbed from that, which is just fantastic. Everyone should listen to it, because it's scary, but it's the truth. The truth hurts, but you got to know it. But one of the things was how he was describing that once you've been away for like 18 to 20 hours, cognitively it's the same as being drunk, and it's like, and I'm thinking to myself, the amount of broadcasts I've done where I've had to stay up for that amount of time, or I've been awake for that amount of time. There's a lot. So
then you add in the amount of broadcasts that we've done drunk.
yeah. Yeah, there's moving on. Moving on. Swiftly from that one.
No, I that is scary to think about. I mean, just from that aspect of the cognitive, but also I know like one of them was if you are not getting your 8 hours every night, if you're sitting somewhere at like 4 or 5 hours, which happens frequently for a lot of us over the course of a 6 or 7 day event when we travel.
Jet lag's a bitch.
Yeah, and you start it starts aging you to like a massive degree where like you are actually functioning like you're actually aged like 10 years if you're not getting appropriate sleep, and it's like holy fuck.
Yeah, scary.
Please, no.
I
had to turn that one off. I didn't want to hear anymore. I listened to like the first like 30 minutes of it and I was like, nope.
Yeah,
I already know all this stuff deep down, even if I don't know the science behind it. I know I'm destroying myself.
It's amazing, as like saying, yeah. So actually, when you're awake, you're actually at all times accruing low-level brain damage, and it's just like,
I've already got
excuse
that.
me, what are you saying? Why are you telling me this?
No, but I mean that brings up like another aspect of circling back to even players and even us with the kind of tournament schedule is like. I think the hard part for a lot of us who have been freelance for so long is I think most of us are in that kind of mode where we realize we want to go exclusive, because when you go exclusive and you can start creating kind of the content projects that I want to do, for instance, you actually have an employer who's going to be willing to produce them as part of the deal, and you're making it for them and you're helping them build the show, and you feel like you're a part of this project instead of being the hired mercenary. But also you get the calm down schedule, and I think everyone's kind of ready for that on a certain degree. It's just, again, it's one of those situations where the TOs, whether it's monetarily, whether it's in terms of resources, whether it's in terms of organization or whatever it might be, can't afford it on some level. Like I said, whether it's whether it's money or whether it's if I join this organization, part of my allure is that part of the lure that would be that I can create some of the content. I can do like my greatest games, which is a project that I still always have in the back of my mind to be able to do the next one. But do they have the resources? Will they be able to give me a camera guy, like a crew to record the interviews? Will they have the editor available to me for like 4 days that I can do it on? I'm never sure about that. So for various reasons, it's just not a possibility at the moment, which is kind of tough. And that's even before you start approaching, which we don't need to get into, but the political landscape of everything.
Oh yeah. Honestly, like, with Overwatch, let's say, the talent.
I'm
Overwatch,
so jealous of those motherfuckers.
No, exactly. So
I'm so jealous.
I was about to say, if they'd come up to me and said, hey, we're going to pay you, a 6-figure salary, a pretty big one.
Yep.
You'll have to work 6 months of the year, 4 days of broadcast a week, and during the 6 months that you're not doing the Overwatch League, there'll be other events which you will get first dibs on, being the main Overwatch talent, and you can make like good fees from that. And you don't have to travel. You can stay in sunny California.
Yeah.
And
you do love California.
You can just live your life.
Should have gone Overwatch. It sounds like you're already halfway there.
And it's like, because that's like effectively that's like how their deal goes, and it's like that world is so very different from a quality of life perspective. And I don't want to keep you for too much longer, but I did want to talk a little bit about quality of life, because I think quality of life is super important. We can't be killing ourselves, and I think a lot of the things that you've discussed, like let's say just a bad format that creates bad working hours, which creates tensions within the commentary group, which creates an effect and impact on people's ability to be happy and creative, affecting their ability to perform on the show, affecting their ability to feel like that they have good job worthiness. Like there's a lot of like knock-on effects to this kind of lifestyle that a lot of you guys are living, more so than I am with I've had stints like you guys have done, but not for the extended period. And so how do you like this is the thing too, when people talk to me about this job, sometimes I say that I say it's amazing for in many ways. It is so amazing, and I feel very privileged and lucky. But it was a hell of an adjustment period. It took me a good 1.5 to 2 years of drinking too much, of doing too many self-destructive things, to then find myself in a place where like, okay, now I kind of get I understand how to like balance my life so that I'm not just like wanting to do horrible things.
That
like drinking all the time.
You're exactly right. That first like year and a half, maybe even 2 years was just like a rush. Looking back, it went so quick from when I started in 2015 to
It's because you can't remember half of it.
There is that. No, but it was just like one non-stop party, wasn't it? Of just self-destructive behavior of mostly just boozing. Just because all of a sudden, like, we have this game we love, we're traveling around the world, and we're like, for me personally, I was probably making 6 times as much money than I'd ever made before in my life.
Yeah,
and that happened very quick. That was within, that I got to that point within like 3 months of starting to commentate, which was insane. So that was very, when you get to that point and you're just kind of enjoying the ride and you're not really thinking about the long term, you're not even sure if it's a career, you're just wondering, is it going to last? Just going to have as much fun with this as possible. You're spending far too much money on booze. You're sleeping too little. You're going out. I think the other tough part is, obviously the first 2 things you do when you travel to a new city, and I wasn't very well traveled when I started this job, is one, you want to go, experience the local cuisine, the local food and everything like that. And then obviously you want to see the nightlife, and you want to see what the bars are like. You want to see what the women are like out at the bar. So you're going out and you're having a nice meal, and then you're drinking, and then you're getting a kebab on the way back. And, there's a reason why all of us at some point have grown a beard, and it's because, we've all added on like that freshman 15, where like freshmen in university gain all the weight from drinking beer, at least in the States, that's what we call it. You have, it's kind of the same thing with commentary. And I think now we finally, last year, I think you were kind of one of the first people to get back into it, was, start getting yourself in better shape, start taking care of yourself. But it's not just that, because I think we kind of calmed down at the drinking probably towards the end of 2016, the drinking and partying. Yeah. But it is just the time spent away from home. It's like, are you always going to have access to a gym? Our hotel gym's going to have everything you need to make sure you're staying involved. Like, what do you do when you have 8 hours to yourself, or 8 hours with which to do absolutely nothing in a city where you know nobody, in a city that you've been to 8 times? You don't really feel like going out and exploring. How do you occupy yourself in a hotel room? Because the easy thing to do is go get a drink. That's very easy. Just walk down to the hotel bar and have a beer. But more than anything, it occupies so much time that you don't have it for anything else. Like, one of my passions.
And also there, one thing, you're probably quite jet lagged.
Yeah.
Very fatigued.
And maybe you're just trying to stay awake for 5 hours so you can actually get on the schedule. Yeah.
Because I wanted to say that, drinking is the really easy thing, but it can be incredibly alluring, because it's very de-stressing. In that way, when you're and you're also, it's something that it's that bonding activity with the other talent who aren't necessarily also your greatest friends, but people that you're on the road with, and you've made friends of circumstance.
It is that weird thing where it is like a family thing, where I think a lot of us kind of felt that camaraderie, the family level camaraderie, and a lot of us still do on these kind of circuits, because you do get annoyed with each other, and you do fight, whether it's over something professional or personal, and you do argue and you do disagree, and then you do go out and have fun together, and you do forget all about it. So you're not always going to love each other, you're not always going to be best friends, but you are family in the regard that, we always repair the relationship. I say always. I don't mean always. Usually. For me, always. But no, I think the big thing with the quality of life as well is you don't have any time to get away and just take your brain off of esports or CounterStrike is the tough part. It occupies over so many different time zones, especially now that Asia is getting more involved. That, no matter what time of the day it is, you can always get a message about someone who wants something, who wants to do work, or who wants, some kind of thing. But, you look at, for instance, me with hiking is something that I'm starting to try and get back into. That's kind of a big thing. I know, like, Matt has his racing. Henry has, what does Henry have? He's got something. Music.
He's got money.
He does have money.
He just looks at it.
You had your hobby of you have your hobby of like trying to get back in shape, being able to do the handstand and everything, and you were doing the rings,
the surgery.
Semler, you have that. Semler found his climbing. That was something he did when he was younger that he wants to get back into, much like me with hiking. Anders has his now side project, but like you need to have time. You need to have a hobby that can take it off something. And for a long time, especially, before all of us kind of came back into it, Counter-Strike was our hobby from like our real job. And then all of a sudden it became a real job. And now you had to find a new hobby, but you don't have any time to actually do it. And you don't have the resources when you're constantly traveling. And that slowly just wears on you. And some people handle it better than others. And I mean, we can just kind of get the elephant out of the room here. And I don't think you would mind us talking about this, but that whole situation with Matt that went down, that is not an overnight thing. And I think the reason why a lot of us came to his defense is because we know he's not racist. We all have been with him for 3 years. We know he is not a racist or a prejudiced person, but
just a bit of an idiot.
Yeah, there's that. But that is just like a slow buildup of he loves racing, and he was never allowed to have any time to kind of get involved in that. and he was never he never got to be able to do it the way that he wanted to be involved with racing, and he never got to drive his cars. He never got to be with his, and that's a slow build up over time. And obviously, he made a mistake in how he managed that kind of time in his travel schedule, and we've all made that kind of a mistake. But that is a slow build up to that explosion, and it really puts it in perspective. I'll tell you what as well. While we're on this, just because we just had the news the other day of Anthony Bourdain, in his unfortunate death. The fame and the travel and the money isn't like a victory, but it does kind of give you that worry of your mental health if you're under this kind of strain of having to constantly perform on camera, never being able to go home, never being able to see friends or family or girlfriend, never being able to kind of do some of the other things that you want to be able to do. And it's very easy to kind of lose yourself in the fame and the publicity and the money of it all. It's very easy to feel depressed and like be able to hide that in the fact that I can put out a tweet, an opinion on Twitter, and I will get so many people agreeing with me, and it's like a release of endorphins, or you can go into an arena and you can hype up the crowd, and the crowd will scream behind you to what you're saying, and that makes you feel very, very good. And it's very easy to get lost in that. So the mental health thing is something that I think a lot of us have kind of had like a refreshed vision of being. Of just keeping our eye on it and keeping cognizant of the fact that that's an aspect of our life that we dropped the ball in for probably 3 years, and we need to be able to get back to it.
It takes a lot of work too. It's one of those things where I think a lot of people, I think it's easy not to consider mental health in the way that there are skill sets to it in a sense, because if you look at like some people are just better equipped sort of existentially as it were. So they're better equipped to be sort of self-aware, to be like analytical about themselves and sort of see, okay, I can really kind of see, okay, this is where I'm getting the most sort of resistance or like the most sort of troubling or where I'm feeling the most troubled. Okay, and then you can kind of like deconstruct that and kind of go and repair the bits that some people are quite good at that, but then there are some people that really struggle, and it just feels so ambiguous. You can't pinpoint exactly where the pain is even coming from, if you can even detect that there is pain in the first place, because it may just be that you feel like drinking, you have an impulse to drink, but where is that impulse coming from? That's a question that you have to ask yourself.
Well, we all like to be drunk. That answer for our crowd is a little bit different, isn't it?
Well, until you hit 30 and the hangovers start to get quite severe.
Brutal these days, isn't it? Yeah, I think that was the funny thing. I don't know how this kind of happened. I don't know how fate kind of put us all on the same path, but we are all yes men in this CounterStrike commentary group. You less so these days, but certainly myself, Henry, Alex, and all the guys are. It's like, hey, you want to do this? Yep.
When you say this, do you mean bar? The bar?
Just mostly anything.
Okay, right. Okay. So yeah, it's definitely a huge learning experience, and some of us have taken a few more tumbles along the way.
Yeah, certainly, but I think it's good that all of us have kind of gotten are now kind of more self-aware of it. I think everyone has like a renewed emphasis on being a little bit more healthy in terms of maybe what they eat. The amount that we drink is obviously lessened. So
what about the situation with handling having a girlfriend, for example, because that's obviously very difficult. Like one of the hardest things is spending huge amounts of time away from people you care about.
No, that one's tough. I know. I'll just speak to my own experiences because I don't know. I don't want to throw the other guys under the bus in any kind of crazy way, more than I already have, perhaps.
Well, the bus is. I mean, it's being used liberally today. So you bring it up.
That's a good point. No, like I know I've been dating my girlfriend for it will be 2 years this October. And I've been traveling for I know it went quick, didn't it?
Wow, that is.
And I have been traveling for all of it, obviously, and it's not easy. We go on stretches of there have been stretches of 3 to 4 months where I haven't been able to see her, or she hasn't been able to come visit, or whatever it is. And the tough part is when I go home and I only have 4 days there. It's like she lives on the West Coast as well, so even when I go home, I don't get to see her. So it's difficult. Sometimes it is something where it puts me into a spot that I want to be in because I want to go see her, but it is very tough to say I have 4 days off. Instead of going home, I'm going out to California to see her, staying at her place for 4 days, and then I'm flying out again across the world. But I mean, there's just a lot of sacrifices on both sides, and the majority of it is probably hers. But it's not easy. It takes a lot of communication when you're at events. It takes a lot of maybe staying in the hotel room for an extra hour before meeting the guys down, at the bar or out for dinner or whatever it might be. Or, and the tough part is it's one of those things where I think everyone kind of wants it on a certain degree, right? Like everyone wants to have that girlfriend. It's just like a nice rock, like someone that you can rely on, that knowledge that you have someone who's like, waiting to talk to you when you get back or when you get home, that you get to go see, who's very loving and very caring. And it's not easy to start that relationship in any way. And I think that's the difficult part, is that it feels hopeless. And I'm not going to lie, when I entered this relationship with her, I wasn't hopeless, but like it did feel kind of pointless for a certain amount of time, where I was just like, why am I even doing this if I'm going to be on the road so much? And you just kind of throw that, you just kind of have to take a big risk, and it escalates things,
Yeah.
We were dating for maybe a month and a half before I invited her back to my hometown for Christmas. And that's something that normally in a regular relationship you wouldn't do unless you were probably in that relationship for like 6 months or something like that, and you really, really knew. But at some point you just have to say, we took our first vacation 4 months into the relationship together, and it's just like, you have very limited free time, so everything gets escalated. Everything in your life outside of esports gets sped up to a massive degree, where it's just like, let's just dive right in, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. And on a certain level, I guess that's kind of cool, but it is not easy to kind of manage all that.
It is. I think it was a good. Like, I liked how you said sort of it's sort of the rock in a way, because
I noticed myself feeling more confident in broadcasts when we're in, like, you have the good days and the bad days, obviously, right? Like you have some days where I notice myself, and I don't know about you, but when I know my relationship is in a very good state, I feel much more happy, feel much more confident, feel much more open on a broadcast. And then when we're having a little bit of a fight, then you kind of feel like a little bit more lethargic, a little bit more toned down, less energetic. So it is kind of a wild ride.
You are tethered to it, but there's something about like going back to the hotel room, because it's so many hotels and so many different places, but it's always the same. It's the one word that I would use is isolation. Like, you're isolated, and I think that relationship is really key. I think that I've discovered, because it again, it's something that it's like when you're sick, you don't know how good it feels to be not sick and normal until you're normal and you're like, oh my God, I feel amazing.
Finally.
It's crazy, right? And I think that's the same thing. It really cut through the isolation that I would feel when I would come back to the hotel room. Because the other thing is that even if you do, let's say in my case, you have time where you can go back to your city, I don't know anyone anymore. They're all gone. They've all disappeared. I don't have enough time to establish anything. So
I go home and all my friends are married with kids, and I'm just like,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have any friends anymore, from my hometown. It's very weird.
Listen, Dan, I'll always be there for you.
On that note, it's very, very positive.
No, I understand what you're saying as well. And I will say, the funny thing is, because, my girlfriend's on the West Coast, so usually with time zones, it's so fucked.
Oh yeah.
When I'm available to have like an actual conversation, she's still at work, and then when she gets off work, it's super late for me, and if I have to do an early game and early call time, I can't stay up that late to talk to her. I can't set an alarm and wake up and talk to her. So not that I necessarily, that one's a bit of a stretch anyways, the setting of the alarm thing. But she would call me out of that. It's the only reason I said that. But it is kind of those time zones are so difficult, and when you get done with this long day, there is something very much where, like, there are days where you really want to have a conversation or a chat, and you really do want to have a call, and then you get done with a broadcast, and maybe a game went into like double overtime, or maybe there was a 30-minute delay, and all of a sudden, instead of being at the venue for 6 hours, you were there for like 10 and a half, and you get back and you have that free hour right before you go to bed, and you're just like, I have no desire to hop on a call. And those are the really tough ones, because those are where, like, you have to force yourself to do it because it's going to make her happy, or whoever it might be. Maybe it's like a mom or a dad or just a family member or whatever it might be. And things like that. And it's not just girlfriends though. My brother has 2 kids. I've been traveling. I've been away with 2 nephews being born over the past 2 years, and every time I go home, it's like a whole new person. They grow just a little bit more. So that's a bummer that I'm not able to like actually be able to spend time with family and the new nephews and my brother and everything like that. But there's just a lot of sacrifices. I really liked the way I phrased this, if I'm going to toot my own horn.
Yeah, do it.
CounterStrike at one point in my life, CounterStrike has, well, not all one point, but CounterStrike at one point in my life has been, my brother, it's been my girlfriend, it's been my best friend, it's been family, it's been parents. It's been ex-girlfriend. Like, CounterStrike at some point has taken the place of a relationship. You know, when I was in college and I was really struggling and didn't have a great relationship with my parents, you know, CounterStrike was what I always turned to kind of, you know, forget about the struggles and kind of just leave them by the side for a moment. You know, when I would break up with a girlfriend in college or whatever it might be, CounterStrike was the thing I turned to make myself happy, because I always really enjoyed playing CounterStrike. So at some point it does occupy a lot of time where another relationship would be, and that's where the major sacrifices come in.
It's funny because I'm just recalling our previous conversation on last podcast where you're like, if there's one thing a pro player shouldn't have, it's a girlfriend.
Well, there's always three, right? I think it's the girlfriend is always. It would be fun to have a discussion to find people who think which is the biggest vice to have for a player to ruin a career, because there's three of the big ones. It's girlfriends, it's cannabis, and it's like, well, World of Warcraft at the time that this was created, but it'd obviously be something like Fortnite or PUBG now, wouldn't it? But it would be funny to have three people on a podcast who think one of the three and have them just lay out their arguments for it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That would be a nice podcast. Yeah, we'll make that happen.
Awesome.
Which camp do you fall in? Which one is the worst? Girlfriend, cannabis, or the game?
I think it would probably be a relationship, I reckon.
Okay.
Because I don't know, because because then you have a priority that is another human being. And I feel like that priority is always going to be just outweigh everything else. Because you can, the other things you can have in your life, but if you really care about winning, I think you can find a way to manage it. But if there's a girlfriend, like, there's another human being.
Yeah.
Like you have to bend to you know, certain things for that. So I would say girlfriend, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. But luckily I'm not going to be a professional player, I don't think, anytime soon. So I'm safe.
See, for me it'd be weed.
Really.
It'd be the cannabis.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It'd be the wacky tobacco. The devil's lettuce.
The wacky backy, yeah. So you're talking about tooting a horn. Is that a horn that you press as you drive over?
It's on the bus. It's on the bus. It's on the bus. That horn is on the bus.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think as we come full circle back to the bus, I think it's time to
drive on out of here.
To drive on out of here. There we go. All right. Thank you very much, Jason, for doing this once again.
Of course.
Well then, that was quite the ride. Brilliant conversation. Jason is definitely going to be coming on quite a lot, I think, on the podcast. It's always really fun to talk to him, and he articulates very well. I mean, his job is to talk about CounterStrike, so it's no surprise there. But yeah, if you guys have any ideas as to who you think would be good on the podcast, or any episodes, or you know, that could be of a particular interest to you from a topic perspective, please tweet me. I will take a page out of the book of Preparara. And if you guys can use a hashtag AskDDK, that should work. And I will get into the habit of checking that. And I will answer your questions and throw that into the beginning of some podcasts. And I think this would be quite cool as well, because I do actually get a lot of questions about various subjects. And, you know, it doesn't have to be relevant whatsoever to the podcast that will be about to take place. It can be questions about current events. It can be questions about, you know, my thoughts on, you know, various approaches when it comes to, you know, being a competitive player, from, you know, sports psychology, you know, whatever you want, honestly. Hashtag AskDDK, I'll give that a check, and that will be really cool. I think it'd be a nice way to segment the podcast to sort of diversify the content a little bit, and also, you know, get just get more ideas out there, and that's always good. Ideas are good. We like ideas. So I suppose that really does it for now. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.